Boxer Enterprise is an enterprise operations platform, and we're going to talk about one of the many things it can do today, creating action plans. The truth is that in companies sometimes we have problems, and finding these opportunities can be challenging. If you want to be successful, we have to respond quickly and effectively, and truly competitive companies will learn from these experiences. So we're going to start with an example. It's a thing. It could be really anything in the company. It could be a person, a branch, a location. It doesn't matter. What's important is that sometimes parts of it are good and parts of it are bad. And if we have a small number of those things, it's pretty easy to understand where the opportunities are. But when we start having a large number, it's difficult to find out where the problems are. Well, if we could isolate them easily, we would be able to create action plans to fix the issues. In this case, each of these things has a manager who's responsible for it, and a supervisor who they're going to work with on their action plan. Now, this is what happens in a typical company. The first thing I'll point out is that these managers are operating in isolation. They can all see the supervisor, but they don't usually see what the other one is doing. They each have a set of problems that they can see. These are obstacles, opportunities, things they have to get around, and they each chart their own course through those obstacles. Let's look at what happened. First of all, we missed one. That was an opportunity that we kind of knew was there, but we didn't get to it. Second of all, this guy didn't finish his action plan. We just didn't notice. Also, everybody was operating in isolation. We had the same problem, but each person figured out their own way to deal with it. And finally, from the supervisor's perspective, it would be very difficult to track what was actually happening. And there's really no feedback loop to take the results of this unstructured experience and put it back into the organization in a better way. Well, we had action plans, but they were unstructured. What would it look like if we wanted to create structured plans? The first thing is we need to line out the steps, identify the problem, formulate a plan, implement the plan, and finally we learn from that experience. Let's break it down into more detail. In the identify problem category, what we want to do is be consistent. We want to always understand the problem the same way, and we want to identify them on a regular basis. Second, when we're formulating a plan, we want to use best practices. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. When we're implementing the plan, we need to stay focused and make sure that we're following up on everything. And finally, when we learn from it, we're trying to generate actionable insights. The great thing about this, if you take a step back, this is a virtuous cycle. You identify the problem, formulate the plan, fix it, and then you learn, and the learning from it helps make the problems go away in the future. It's a good thing to have. Let's get into the details. Identifying the problem starts with an analyst who gets a case that says assign an action plan. This person's got some instructions that they're going to read in standards, and they're going to follow those instructions to run a report, and that report will tell us where our problems are, and then the analyst uses departments to find the appropriate people to conduct an action plan. Now, into the formulating plan section. It starts with the manager receiving a case that tells them, hey, you've got to make an action plan. The manager reads the instructions, and the instructions include an overview of the process and a description of plays. Hold on a second. What is a play? This is somewhat of an unfamiliar concept, so we're going to take a detour now and talk about what a play is. What is it? Well, it could be a best practice, a way to do something that works. And in order to be a play, it's got to be effective, available for somebody to find, and it's something that we can teach, that we can train somebody to do. Some examples could be really basic. Start your computer, meet with key customers, get an audit. There are lots of things that could be a play. It's something that you would do to fix a problem. The important part is that there's not just one play, there's lots of them. The idea is don't reinvent the plays. What we want to do is select and adapt them. So we go from having a whole bunch to having a small number, and those plays become the action plan. That's a quick story about plays. Let's get back to our process map. Where we last were, the manager had read the instructions and seen a list of plays. Next step is that the manager selects those plays on a quest form, and that creates cases. Those cases are what they manage as the action plan. Finally, the learn from it phase, this is where the analyst gets back involved again. They get a case that says, hey, let's take a look at those action plans and see how things were going. There's some instructions for that. There's some reports that they can run, and the analyst publishes the results of those to the appropriate people. One important thing to understand is that this doesn't happen with just one person. In fact, it happens at scale. When the action plans are assigned, they can get assigned very easily to every instance where we need one. And the interesting thing about that is that it generates this information that we can report against. First of all, who made the plans? Did everybody do it? Second of all, what were in the plans? What plays were we selecting? That's really a representation of things that we think we should be doing across the organization. Then, how's it going? What is the status of the things that we said we were going to do? Are people following up? Are they finishing these things? What's done? What's not done? This is a way that you could look across the entire organization at the results of many, many action plans and see what our status is. And finally, and this is a holy grail in many ways of improvement, is what worked. Okay, were there plays that impacted our performance? Because those are things we should focus on. If you think that this is kind of abstract, let's look at an example for loss prevention. If you're operating a retail store, you see that people are stealing things, and we've taken our process flow and arranged it horizontally. In the first group, we have identify the problem and all the steps that we talked about before. Then we formulate a plan, we implement that plan, and finally we learn from it. Only a few of these items are unique to the concept of loss prevention. In fact, items 1, 3, 5, and 6 are the only ones that even mention loss prevention. When you look closely, you see that 1 and 5 really only relate to the title of a case. So we're left with 3 and 6 as the ones that really relate specifically to this concept. 3 is a report that we use to identify the problems, and 6 is the instructions for the plays. So really when we look at this, we could say that the only unique elements are loss prevention report and loss prevention plays. From the supervisor's standpoint, we could just put in a different report and different plays. Maybe we're talking about trouble tickets, revenue variances, quality scores, really a lot of different things around the organization. The concept here is modular. All you need to do is come up with a report that identifies the problems and plays that represent our best practices. Everything else is consistent. So what we could do is use this anywhere in the company that we might need interventions. If we do this effectively, we're going to find opportunities consistently, intervene using best practices across the entire organization, learn from the experience, and we're going to be able to do this anywhere in the company. That's a great result.